The Dark Story of Creation, Chapter 9, First Part. The boy's initial impression of the Iron Castle only grew firmer as he trailed after the two noblemen. This thing they were currently riding in absolutely did not seem like a train. Consider the lavish use of gold and jewels. The corridor ceiling and walls adorned with such intricate carvings they conveyed a sense that its builder wouldn't allow any surface to remain mundane. Corridors with carpets that had a pile so deep it looked as if you might sink up to your knees in it. And the fact that having elegant crystal chandeliers graced the ceilings was the norm. A lobby so vast and opulent, it might be mistaken for an actual room. The restaurant. The concert hall looked to be on the scale of 100 times the size of a village chapel. Musicians the likes of which Pick had never seen produce music sweeter than he'd ever heard, flowing out constantly over the uninhabited rows of seats. There were no people anywhere, not even a sense that people had been there. And when passing through halls with cathedral ceilings, the boy looked up to the windows set up so high, he got the feeling he might have glimpsed some figures there. And when he went through the dance hall, he distinctly sensed figures in formal wear, and dresses executing the steps of an elegant waltz behind him. Here on this train, the past lived on in silence. But most startling of all was the length the train boasted. One Pick, whose legs had earned him a reputation for running like the wind, was finally out of breath. His surroundings abruptly changed. Now there was no trace of the train as dazzling as any hotel. Transparent walls stood to either side of the corridor, and beyond them were innumerable beds and mechanical devices whose purposes Pick didn't fathom. As white predominated the floors and walls, these were obviously operating rooms, and each and every one of them had been laid to waste with savage force, committing them to the care of the shadow of death. "What the hell happened on this train?" the boy murmured. "We shall tell you," said a voice that rained down on him from above. Although the pair of noblemen had been nearly 100 yards ahead of him scant seconds earlier, they now stood to either side of Pick, flanking him tightly. "How nice of you to tell us. Was it treasure you sought, or the girl?" asked the grinning Gorshin, pearly white fangs peeking from between his lips. "It ain't like that," Pick bellowed, and as he did so he slipped from between them to stand in the center of the corridor. "Wait." Benelli tried to grab him, but Pick avoided his arms, running straight ahead. In this case, that was toward the rear of the train. Suddenly, his balance was upset. The floor beneath his feet had disappeared. Undoubtedly, this was a trap for intruders. Pick seemed to fall forever in the pit that had suddenly opened. The next thing he knew, blonde hair swayed overhead and lapis blue eyes were looking down at him. "Awake, are you? Such a brave lad. I'm Countess Genevieve." To the dumbstruck Pick she continued, "That hole is for dealing with invaders, though it also doubles as a device for accommodating guests. It's so vast, even adults might find themselves lost down there." Pick sprang up. He already understood the situation. "Where is she?" "Be at ease. She's in the safest place on the entire train. Are you her little brother?" That's a laugh. Who'd want to be that prissy's? Don't say such things. Be nice. The noble woman said, her sensual red lips making an almost innocent smile. So where is she, then? That's where I've got to go to. Will you be nice? If you will, I can take you there. However, in order to see her, you must first get the Grand Duke's permission. I wonder, are you brave enough to meet the Grand Duke? Yeah, of course so, Pick said, throwing back his shoulders with bravado. I don't care who it is, noble or monster. I don't show my back to nobody. Bring me to him right quick. His face, red and puffed with fright and faint cheer, stiffened at once. The Countess had brought her own face closer to his. The beauty of the nobility had a strange air that made it differ from that of humanity. In addition, there was something regal about this woman that could inspire even the mind of a child. You're a spirited boy, are you not? Now I wanted to have a son like you. Can you walk? Yeah. Then let us be off. It's only 5 minutes on foot. Sounds like part of a realtor's spiel, Pick thought, despite his fear. When they stepped through the door, Pick froze solid. Xenogortion and Benelli were standing there. They gazed down at him intently, evil in their eyes, but the boy immediately scowled back at them. What the hell? You bastards want a piece of me, he snarled, taking a brawler's stance. Calm yourself. The Countess here has told us not to do anything to you. This time, we're your escort. This time. So next time we'll throw down, eh? Pick thought in his heart of hearts. What of the failures? Asked the Countess. At present, a peacekeeping unit is in operation. We should have the results soon, Benelli replied. Shifting her gaze, the Countess said, You do not look well. Xenogortion had been looking down at the floor, but he raised his face. His long, formal jacket was completely soaked with blood. The wound from Dee's sword still hasn't healed. It won't even stop bleeding. It was Benelli who offered this explanation. Gortion looked down at the floor once more. Feeling a strange presence, Pick looked up at the Countess. Her lovely visage was warped by surprise. Impossible. The two of you have the Grand Duke's blood. You are not the nobles you once were, and yet you were dealt a wound that will not close. This cannot be. Yes, it is, Benelli said, looking askance at Gortion. The man known as Dee is no ordinary hunter. Let me say this. I feel the same something from him that I do from the Grand Duke. Silence rolled by. A voice like death itself said, That something is power. It was Xenogortion. His face was white as a sheet, yet crimson eyes blazed from it, burning with anger and hatred, and fright. When his blade cut me thusly, he continued, I felt something more than just flesh and bone being cleaved. Perhaps I could call it the source of my life. The wound will not close, the bleeding will not cease. If this continues much longer, I will be gone. At present I can barely restrain them, but soon I will be unable to keep my blood beads from running amok. The Countess had her eyes shut. Immediately opening them, She said, "Let us make haste. It may be that we face something incredible." The Countess had said it was 5 minutes on foot, and sure enough, at the end of the corridor, an enormous metal door different from all the others came into view. Completely free of ornamentation, its surface gleamed starkly from the illumination. It would seem we have arrived without incident. Sensing the genuine relief in the Countess's voice, Pick was a little surprised. This was a woman who didn't think those two devilish noblemen were worth the time of day. A woman who ordered around a gravely wounded noble. And yet something was prowling around here that frightened her. "Not yet," Benelli said, his right hand touching the great scythe on his back. "Stay on your guard until we are inside." "I know," the Countess replied. Yet her elegant stride never faltered as she walked up to the door. It was then that an almost indescribable sound reached the ears of all of them. It was a human voice. But could any human, or even a noble, raise such a cry? Like agony seared them to the marrow of their bones, and their soul was being carved out. It would be better to die than to meet whatever fate prompted such a scream. Pick covered his ears. Even the pair of noblemen turned their cruel faces in all directions, looking around. Going in, remaining expressionless, the Countess nodded in reply. Zeno Goshen pulled the chain next to the door. With a sound, the door slid to the right. First Goshen entered, with the Countess and Pick following after. Last was Benelli, who stood lookout in the corridor, and once he joined them, the door shut. Though the agonized voice ceased, Pick didn't take his hands off his ears. Something hot spilled from the corners of his eyes, rolling down his cheeks to his jaw. "Are you crying, little boy?" Benelli sneered, taken in by that pitiful, effeminate voice. "Well then, you are only a human brat after all. A coward to the very pit of your heart." A crack resounded from the nobleman's jaw, not his cheek. Benelli reeled backward for 2 steps before finally righting himself again. Rubbing the delicate hand that had delivered an exceptional right hook, the Countess said sternly, "I will not have you taunting this child. To protect the girl in the Grand Duke's custody. This boy followed the two of you, knowing it might well cost him his life or his soul. I cannot allow such resolve to be belittled. I, Countess Genevieve, forbid you from ever doing so again." "Understood." Benelli immediately capitulated. Those eyes had a malicious gleam, but even that was shaken. It was that voice again, only now it began to echo through the room. "There it goes again," Pick groaned, clamping his hands back over his ears. "No, it's not the same," the Countess told him. "It would seem everyone has their own worries. Let us go." At the urging of the Countess, the group began to pass through a chamber that looked to be a lobby. On opening the door at its far end, they found another corridor. Unlike the others, this was all gleaming silver. The 4 of them halted before the door at the end of the corridor. There could be no doubt that this was where the anguished cries originated. As the Countess advanced, the door opened naturally. It was a large, strange room. Apparently it covered more than 7,000 square feet, yet aside from an assortment of bizarre devices seemingly placed at random, there was nothing to be seen but 5 couches. with a gigantic figure resting on the center one. It was the Grand Duke, sitting back against the sofa with eyes closed. He was directly across from a clear glass pane that ran the entire length of the wall. What the hell is that? Pick's query referred to the Grand Duke, and to what lay beyond the glass. In the distance there loomed an ancient stone wall, of all things. The ghastly voice continued even now. Pick could see with his own two eyes that it came from the Grand Duke's throat. Surely this was the cause of the mournful expression the Countess wore. But what could cause a noble among nobility, a greater noble who treated Sino Gorshin and Benelli like babes, to fall into such a turbulent state even in his sleep? It's behind the glass. Unconsciously, Pick was certain of that. He didn't know why. Behind the glass. That's where the cause lay. Pick didn't care in the least about the Grand Duke's torment. His thoughts were dominated by the face of the girl, on her way home from the capital. Yet somehow, he was hopelessly drawn to this. Drawn to whatever lay beyond the glass. Still covering his ears, Pick realized he was moving toward the pane. The Countess and the two noblemen were so focused on the Grand Duke, they didn't even glance at the boy. So as not to draw their attention, he let his focus drift. Only 15 feet to go. He made a dash forward. No one intervened. Pressing right up against the glass, he peered down. First part, end.